Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 370 of the Stacey West podcast. I am your host this evening, Ben, and I am joined by Chris. How are you doing, mate? Are you keeping well?
I'm keeping well, thank you, though I'm not going to pretend I'm not a little bit tired this evening. Had a long old day at work today, 12-hour shift. So I'm hoping to be running on fumes. You know, sometimes like when you're running on fumes, you're almost like overly...
You get a second
assertive and overly expressive. Maybe that's what I'm going to be now, or maybe in about 5 minutes' time I will crash. But right now I'm feeling good. How are you?
I'm good, mate. Yeah, no, it's all good. I was thinking about this earlier. I was like, we've got a story to tell on the pod, and I have got a story to tell on the pod tonight. So last week had a few friends over, and we played some poker, and it was one of those moments when a friend of mine came through the door. And I was like, "Hi, all right, mate? Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, I'm all good." And he gave me a pack of Kinder Bueno, like a multi-pack of Kinder Bueno. I was like, "Okay, any reason?" He was like, "Yeah, because you said wrongly that they're the best chocolate bar on the podcast the other week." I was like, "Well, number one, I'm right, but also number two, thank you." So yeah, it would appear that if we mention things, then they may manifest themselves in other ways. So. I also like Aston Martins and cheap kitchen quotes. If anybody can sort one of those out for me, it'd be much appreciated.
And I like lots and lots of money.
Yes.
That's all right. That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's my favorite thing.
Yeah, I'm hoping we can manifest something together for the both of us, mate. It would all be good. But yeah, you know, did you get up to much over the weekend, or was it kind of just a bit of a quiet one in general?
A few things behind the scenes going on, which meant I was busier than expected. That was Sunday taken up, hence why we're doing this on Monday. That is my fault, everybody. Apologies. Other things required my attention yesterday.
I should have mentioned that we're Mondays as opposed to Sunday tonight.
Yes, apologies. Unavoidable, sadly. But
no.
Saturday was it Friday? Friday was interesting. So it was my friend's birthday. So we went out for a meal. And as a little pre-drinks thing, ever since I never went to university, but when they were all kind of university age and we used to meet up, go drinking, we used to play this game called Spoof. I'm sure lots of people have heard of Spoof. So there was 4 of us. So there's a drink in the middle, which is like the punishment drink. Everyone puts both of their fingers on the rim of the glass. So there's a total of 8 fingers available there. And then everyone takes it in turns in 3, 2, 1, and you shout out a number between 0 and 8. And at that exact moment, everyone, including yourself, gets to pick whether you leave both fingers on the glass, you lift 1 or 2 off. And if your guess is the correct number of fingers remaining on the glass, you're out, you win. And the last person left in loses, has to have the drink. Now, last time we played this game, which was a few months ago, actually, before Christmas, it's the last time I drank properly. I lost all 4 games in a row. And the probability of that was something like hundreds of thousands to 1, apparently. So we played a game of Spoof, and of course I bloody lost it again, didn't I? So that was 5 in a row, which is over 1,000,000 to 1 chance. And then thankfully, game number 6, I finally didn't lose, which was a success. So yeah, so my friends would they wouldn't forgive me unless I mentioned that. That was Friday. Luckily, that's all I had. I only had a couple of drinks plus that punishment one, so I was all good. And the food at the White Horse, by the way, is absolutely outstanding. Not a sponsorship or anything, though if they would like to sponsor us, they can. And
just say it, and you'll find more food from them finding its way to you. That's how it works.
But it was absolutely outstanding. So I highly recommend that. So yeah, that was Friday night. Saturday was a chilled one. Spending some time with my old man, and similar on Sunday. So yeah, that's me. Football though, should we talk about some football? Yeah, because that happened as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what there is to say too much about the Wycombe game that hasn't already been said. I mean, I think
we haven't said anything yet, and that's a good point. Very accurate.
Well, yeah, that's a fair point. Gaz was obviously quite upfront in saying that he couldn't see the game. He was seeing Goldie looking chain I almost bought tickets to that, but yeah, we've currently got guests, so I couldn't spend the evening, getting drunk and enjoying Welsh rap as much as I would have loved to have jammed out to The Middle of Lidl and other assorted songs. That's a great track, by the way. You should check it out. Yeah, so the Wycombe game. I think going into it, we spoke obviously on Thursday about, I think we can get something from the game. I think personally, I was thinking a draw was probably the most optimistic result we could have hoped for. Obviously they've went on that massive run. They've changed the manager, and they're now they're not flying as much as they were. But I think it's probably safe to say they'll be in the top 6 come the end of the season. And it was it was a game that didn't really have a huge amount of quality in it across the board. I think we probably started a little bit slow, although I think Rico Hackett did have a decent, he had a half chance early doors. His back was to goal, took the ball really well, lovely touch, and then span and couldn't quite wrap his foot around it. There was an early yellow card for Jovan McCarmer, which was a bit of a weird one. Ball went out for a throw in, and he just kind of sticks his hand up in the air as the ball comes in. It's like, that's a silly yellow card. What have you done?
Silly.
And look, I think it's fair. When we believe Jovan's played very well, we'll say it. I don't think he had the best of games on Saturday. And obviously probably the talking points going into the game were the inclusion of Ben House and Eric Ring. Eric Ring, a player that I think the club have got high hopes for next season. He's by his own admission and by the club's admission, he's found it difficult to settle into the English style of football so far, and maybe wing back wouldn't necessarily be his preferred position. So he'd want to play higher up the pitch, and with the new system that we're looking to bring in, it looks like that is going to be an option for him next season. So it was nice to see him come in. And yeah, I think he had a good game. I thought he looked fairly lively. There was one instance in the second half where he forced a semi decent save. I think some people say, it's straight at him, but the technique in the shot was really good, and he forced the save, and he obviously forced the keeper to parry it out into potentially a danger area. We just didn't quite follow it up. But yeah, I thought Eric Ring looked. I thought he looked decent, but I think the main question that some people have had coming from the game is obviously the inclusion of Ben House over James Collins to start with. How did you see that, Chris? Because I know I've got my thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here, isn't there? So I'll touch on Eric Ring first, and then I'll finish off with House/Collins. Excuse me. So firstly on Ring, I think when we brought him in, we obviously we were pretty committed to playing 3-5-2, and we felt that he would offer similar attributes to players that we were losing in that position. Eric was flagged up because of his physical attributes, and his running numbers were really, really impressive, that aligned with our profile of that position. And he felt like he could adapt into that role. It wasn't that we were forcing him to, like it was part of the recruitment. But he hadn't actually played as a wing back at any point in his career. He'd only really played further forward primarily. However, as things have transpired, I think maybe he hasn't adapted to wing back as much as he'd hoped, or even just moving to a new country at a young age for the first time. There's so much going on off the pitch, but I do think his attributes are more suited to playing higher up the pitch, but maybe similar to Rico Hackett in that way, could do a job as a wing back, but probably more threatening and more suited to playing as an out-and-out winger. Mm-hmm. And I think I was really pleased to see him get a start. Michael mentioned that he's going to look to maybe rotate this team a little bit towards the end of the season, not with both eyes, but with one eye on next season a little bit now. Mm-hmm. And that means that you need to give players a chance. And I was quite pleased to see Eric Ring get a chance to impress, and the understanding that it's not necessarily going to be a huge amount for us to play for on the pitch now between now and the end of the season. So we wanted to plan for next a little bit. So I liked that. And I think Eric played pretty well on Saturday in a game which he didn't get a huge amount of opportunity to really drive with the ball. Wycombe are a really good, solid team. I agree with what you mentioned earlier in that they're maybe not quite the team that we played when they came to Sincilbank, but they'll absolutely be in the top 6. They're very, very difficult to beat, particularly at home. And yeah, I thought with the opportunities that he had, Eric did all right. Ben House was an interesting one because I think I mentioned this on Thursday, and I absolutely think there's a role for Ben in the squad. I don't necessarily think he's the guaranteed starter that he maybe was, maybe this time last season that we saw him as that. But absolutely deserves a chance to impress. Gut instinct, by the way, is that if he is offered a new deal, we'll see him playing as in that 10 role more than as an out-and-out forward at times. But part of this was maybe a rotation to give Ben a chance to impress. I think there was maybe more of this, though, was with an eye on Tuesday night against Huddersfield. A very inconsistent Huddersfield team at the moment with a little bit of, I suppose, disconnect between fan base and ownership and squad and whatnot. Yeah. I think if in the assumption that you can't get a fully fit and firing best version of James Collins for 90 minutes on Saturday and Tuesday, you have to then choose which game you want to start him in. Mm-hmm. Do you start away at Wycombe Wanderers in the game in which we want to be solid, we don't want to lose, but realistically it's going to be a really tough game, or a more winnable game on Tuesday at home with a full Central Bank crowd, big away following, big atmosphere against a delicate Huddersfield team in terms of confidence? I think you pick that one. So I think there's maybe an element of, it kind of works both ways. You give Ben an opportunity to impress. In all honesty, not sure he did too much in terms of stamping a authority on it. And I have to start in this role next week. Mm-hmm. But it at least allowed that. It allowed us to rest James Collins at least from the start, so that hopefully he can start tomorrow night against Huddersfield Town and be kind of fit and firing. So I felt it was maybe with one eye a little bit on next season, one eye a little bit on Tuesday, and of the two games, one being at least perceived to be more winnable than the other.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much my thinking as well. I was like, well, yeah, we've got a 2-game week. We've got a striker in his 30s that we would probably think, let's see how he gets on against a team that, like say, low on confidence. I think if we go at them early, and obviously we'll come on to Huddersfield in a little while, if we go at them early, I think we've got every chance of taking something from tomorrow night. But yeah, I think on the balance of it was probably the right call. Whether Ben House is quite the same player that we had this time next season, I don't know. I would definitely agree that he's dropped down the pecking order now. I think Gaz did his dog walk a little bit earlier on and said pretty much the same thing, that if you were to choose your starting number 9 in a lone striker situation at the moment, you'd have James Collins starting as your first choice, and then potentially at the moment, Gaz said he'd probably pick Freddie Draper over Ben House, which I wouldn't necessarily agree with, but I can see where he's coming from. But yeah, look, I think that was pretty much it. I mean, like I say, the only other moment really that we've not spoken about was Ring's shot. Oh, we did speak about that. The moment that I'm thinking of that we didn't really speak about was one that wasn't included on the highlights. It wasn't included in the extended highlights, but it did make me giggle after we realised that he was okay. So Richard Kone and Pordy O'Connor were having a big old ding-dong all the way through the game. Pordy was going back and forth. I think he was in the ref's ear quite a bit. The ref kind of, just said to him, all right, just calm it down a little bit, and we'll see how it goes. And that's some foreshadowing. But yeah, Kone and Pordy were chasing a ball. Kone basically wipes out Pordy. Pordy's screaming at the ref that he's led with his elbow. I don't think he did. I think it was just a poor challenge. The ref didn't immediately give the free kick. The ball then bounces to George Wickens, who launches a George Wickens clearance, and it made it about 3 yards because it was blocked by Richard Kone's face. It was, obviously the immediate concern is the lad all right? But the immediate reaction was, oh, that's quite funny.
Yeah. It is. That's more of a highlight than a lot of them that did feature on the extended highlights, by the way. I think there was 2 extended highlights that had about a minute build-up of shots that went about 50 yards over the bar, 2 separate Wycombe chances, and one that was a period of possession that didn't really lead to anything. Like, that's an example of there's not a lot going on in a game of football when they're the highlights. And the one highlight that wasn't involved that we pick up on is someone getting smashed in the face by a football, which is quite... Now
it's
in
objectively
hindsight,
funny. Let's be fair.
Now if he wasn't Oko, we wouldn't be laughing about it. But he was fine, and it was funny. So yeah, but it says a lot, doesn't it? When that's a talking point from the first half. But it would sting, by the way. That would sting somewhat.
I think the same thing happened to Rico early in the first half as well. I think he got caught with a shot which kind of ricocheted off him, but Rico stood up and shook it off because that's what Lincoln City players do. But I mean, look, the 2 big talking points from the game, obviously the first one being Wycombe's goal. So seconds before they score, Sean Rowan pings a really, really lovely pass up to Rico Hackett. Rico doesn't quite control it. It comes off his chest. I think he loses his balance a little bit. Again, that's more foreshadowing. He loses his balance slightly, and then the ball falls to the Wycombe players. Wycombe break, and the ball comes over. Sean goes to put the tackle in, and I don't know if he's misjudged the bounce. I don't know if he's under the pressure from the attacker, but he doesn't control it. He doesn't do it well. And, unfortunately, it led to a goal. Now, it's one of those things that we've spoken about time and time again at this point. It's another individual error. And the one thing that I will disagree on is the word uncharacteristic that was used by Radio Lincolnshire. They said it was an uncharacteristic error. And I'm kind of the opinion at this point that it might not be an individually uncharacteristic error, but in terms of Lincoln City as a whole, that seems to be how a lot of our goals have been given away this season. It's become a characteristic of the team rather than an individual. Like, nobody can turn around and say, Sean Rowan's crap, he's given away 20 goals this season, or as an extreme. He hasn't. There haven't been that many mistakes from Sean Rowan. But yeah, it was disappointing to see because ultimately, like I said earlier, that there wasn't a huge amount of quality in the game. I think to be honest, it kind of had 0-0 written all over it until we gifted them a goal. And it's not the first time that we said that this season, is it, Chris?
Yeah, I think I'm 100% with you, really, on your analysis there of the uncharacteristic or notness of our team, because there haven't been many goals that we've conceded this season where the opposition has scored a legitimately good goal. And that's kind of a good thing, because it means that we're not prone to making systemic errors. Haven't got a specific weakness, other than maybe being caught on the break a couple of times throughout the season compared to maybe some of our rivals. But generally speaking, tactically, we've been all right. Like, we haven't given a huge number of chances away. We don't give many high quality chances away. So that's a good thing. But we still conceded a certain number of goals this season, and we have probably dropped a number of points due to the fact that when teams do score, it's often because we've almost beaten ourselves at times rather than the teams having to beat us. Now, there have, of course, been some games where we've been poor and we have legitimately deserved to lose. But it's frustrating when this happens. What I will say is it's probably uncharacteristic for Sean. I think Sean's been one of our most consistent players this season, and I'll make no apology for kind of defending him here. I absolutely feel like he's got a load of credit in the bank for us in terms of his pros compared to his cons. And also, I think we'd be a far worse team without him in it. However, he did make a mistake here. Yeah, I think he slept a little bit, but he's made a misjudgment in regard to decision making. Ultimately, if he just clears it at first opportunity, then it might not look pretty, but the chance doesn't happen. So, yeah, he's made a mistake, and that happens, doesn't it? I would also like to say that I'd rather that happen in a game that, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't really matter. As much as at the time it was frustrating, of course, we probably deserved at least a point out the game. Well, not at least, we deserved a point. Didn't deserve more than that. I'd rather it happen at this point in the season with nothing to play for than in a playoff final, for example. But but it was a mistake, and it was another one. In terms of the team, though not another one for Sean. I can't think of another game this season where a direct error of his has led to a goal. There might be one, but I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Off the top of my head, I can't either. I know there obviously have been other mistakes from others, but it's.
So yeah, I'd say uncharacteristic for Sean, uncharacteristic for our defence. Probably not. I think I would like to see us really improve in that next season. And let's be honest, if we have improved, if we played exactly the same as we had in almost every game so far this season, even the games we played poorly in, but we just didn't concede half of the goals that we did directly from individual errors, we'd probably be pushing the playoffs. And we're not a good enough team to be a playoff team, but actually we're probably not that far away if we just cut out those individual errors. But I think what's worth pointing out as well is the more expensive players probably make fewer errors, don't they? So there is a budgetary thing coming back into this, as there kind of always is at the moment with the landscape of League One.
Indeed, and for those of you playing Stacey West Bingo, it was 19 minutes 45 before the word budget was mentioned. So there we go. Yeah, look, it was an unfortunate error. It's led to a goal, and it's cost us a point. But at this point in the season, like we say, I'm a lot less angry about it than I would have been, 3 or 4 months ago. It's that's happened. Okay, well, put it aside. Let's carry on and let's go into next season. Obviously, the other big talking point, and I'm really interested to see what you think about this, Chris, because I don't think we've really spoken about the incident.
Correct.
But stoppage time, the ball comes across, or the ball comes forward rather. Paudie O'Connor. Let's be fair. Paudie O'Connor, literally on the way to committing this foul, almost has his shirt pulled off his back. And then the ball goes out of play, and it looks like he's tried to hook it back. Now, the fact is, the ball had gone by the time he'd started to go to ground. It had gone out of play. Whether it's a case of, I'm just going to swing at this and see what I can do, or whether there was malice in it to try and take down their defender, is open to interpretation. But in my opinion, this is a harsh red card for Paudie O'Connor. I think it's clumsy, it's silly, but I think from where we were at that point in the game, we're obviously chasing it. We're trying to get something out of the game. Paudie is attempting to whether it's as is described in the press conference, trying to get the ball back to the keeper for a quick restart, or whether it was for trying to keep it in to put the cross back. It's a silly challenge. It's a clumsy challenge. I don't think that if that foul happens in the middle of the pitch, I don't think the ref gives a red card. And I think, to be honest with you, part of me just thinks that the ref had enough of Paudie at that point. He'd been, like I say, he'd been in his ear quite a lot throughout the game. He'd been, I think at one point he called him over to have a chat with him when nothing else was happening. And I think that might have been shortly after the incident where he was claiming that Kone had elbowed him. But it felt like he was potentially on a bit of thin ice. Now, the fact that he's gone in and the ref's given him a straight red, that surprised me massively. I thought that was quite harsh. So your opinions on the sending off, Chris?
I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you. And I think that might be a bit of an unpopular opinion, to be honest. And because I know Gary did a little dog walk video earlier, and he said that he thought it was a red card, completely understand why it was given, and was quite critical of Paudie. And yeah, I don't think I agree with that. And I don't think this is blindly supporting a player. I think if that happened the other way around, you wouldn't be shouting for a red card. I really don't. Like you say, if that happened in the middle of the pitch, I don't think it gets given as a red. I think if that happens 10 minutes earlier in exactly the same situation, it doesn't get given as a red. I think the referee has been influenced by the fact it looked nasty. Don't get me wrong, it did look nasty because of how the defender landed. And the fact that Paudie, for want of a better phrase, has been pissing him off all afternoon from a referee's perspective, saw it as an opportunity to go, right, you can do one now. Now, was it clumsy? Yeah, maybe so. Was it necessary? In hindsight, no. But I genuinely believe he was just trying to keep the ball in play. Now, also, Paudie does, I think he's a pretty good pro on the whole, but I know he has been a little bit tempered once or twice this season that has got him in trouble. Now, I think, again, pros outweigh the cons with that. You need to have an element of aggression to play how he does and be as dominant as he does. And could I see at another stage in the game or any other game, Paulie maybe letting his temper get the better of him and maybe go a little bit too aggressively into certain tackles at times? Yes. But he's also someone that really wants to win. And I think almost last kick of the game, opportunity from his mind to try and keep the ball in play, keep it alive. I don't think there's any other thought in his mind that he's trying to get the ball back in play, to keep it in. I don't think he's trying to give it back to the goalkeeper. I think he's just trying to keep it in. Now, can I see why it was given as a red? Yes, of course I can. I'm not going to pretend that it was completely innocent and that he's an angel and shouldn't be punished at all. I was very surprised to see a straight red. I was fully expecting a yellow card. And I think if it was a yellow, not a single player on that football pitch complains about it. A red felt a little bit.
It was a bit extreme, wasn't it?
Yeah, it felt a little bit desperate. Well, not desperate might be the right word, but a little bit immediate. The referee didn't have any thought. It was all like straight away, red card straight away. No thought, no kind of time to catch your breath or to make a composed decision. It was just right. Here's my opportunity. But maybe I'm starting to come across a little bit of kind of tinfoil hat on at the moment. So I will stop. I'm not saying he's innocent, and I'm not saying that I can't understand why it was given as a red. But as was confirmed earlier today, and it was mentioned that they might do in the press conference after the game, the club have said that they've appealed it. So they wouldn't do that lightly. They wouldn't do that without feeling that there are legitimate grounds to do so. So I'm going to say that even if other people don't agree, Ben, at least the club agree with us. So yeah, that's my 2 pence worth really. But yeah, and the annoying thing is that it didn't really impact the game either way. No. But it does impact the next 4 potentially, yes. and that, or potentially 5 if the appeal is overturned. So and is not overturned. Sorry. So yeah, for that reason, that's maybe a little bit unwise.
I think that's the biggest thing to come from it is obviously the fact that Paulie has been sent off twice this season, and let's not be let's not say that we've got our club hat on and everything else. Discipline has been an issue with Paulie O'Connor this season in a similar way that it has been an issue with Ethan Arahan. The difference is that Ethan Arahan's are primarily for chatting back, and Paudie's have been being Paudy.
Which does include chatting back at times as well, by the
way.
I remember his red at Stevenage was just off the back of being in the referee's ear all match, having a tussle with Carl Piagiani for 90 minutes and going over the top at the end. Again, felt harsh at the time, but again, you can see why it's given.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's not an innocent man, but I think he's maybe been a little hard done by. He wasn't innocent totally in terms he didn't commit an offence, but I think a straight red's harsh.
Yes, absolutely. So there we go. That is the Wycombe game wrapped up. I think we've done well to get 25 minutes out of that, to be honest with you, because there wasn't a huge amount that happened. But one thing that has happened this week, and we'll have probably about 5 minutes on this before we go to a break, and then we'll come back and wrap it up. But the thing that's happened today, a lot of clubs have released their financials, haven't they, Chris?
It's deadline day.
Not the good deadline day. It's the numbers deadline day. It's the deadline day for people who automatically open up Excel when they open their laptops up. So Chris is currently giving the shifty eyes for those listening. Yeah, so it was the deadline for all of the 23-24 season financials to be filed by a bunch of football clubs. So Chris has compiled all of the ones for League One. I believe, have you got the ones for this season's League One but last season's spending?
Yes, yeah. So it's every team that's currently competing in League One this season. What were their financials for the last season? Because that's how it works. Because some clubs similar to us released them early. We know that we lost 2.9 or almost £3 million last year, and in isolation, that looks bad, and it isn't good because losing money in a normal business is obviously bad. And we spoke about this at length when it was announced. So, I think we've probably done that to death. We don't need to delve into that in more depth. But I think football is different, and it shouldn't be, but it is. And it's always relative, isn't it? Is any other business losing £3 million a year a bad thing? Obviously, yes, that's a bad thing to happen, isn't it? But when you talk about football, it's all relative because, well, what's everyone else doing? If everyone else is making a profit, then yeah, it's horrific. But the reality is, what else is going on in the Football League? And it just goes to show. I was staggered, by the way, absolutely staggered by some of these numbers, but absolutely staggered. So I'm going to read just some out to you all here. Now, firstly, a couple of things to clarify. There's one team who has not yet submitted their account, which is Crawley Town. Ever since Rugby United have been in charge, there's no real way of knowing what their financials are like. From what I've seen, I am not an accountant, so my time on Company's House earlier was spent from an amateur perspective. I'm trying to work it out, but I might not know the finer details. Yeah, well, there's a couple of things because Stevenage is another interesting one. So, because they are registered as a small business, or I don't know the exact ins and outs of this. Like I said, I'm not an accountant, but basically it means that they have to present certain accounts, but they don't have to show everything. So what they've shown is what their assets are, what their income is. They haven't shown what their outgoings are at any point. So we've no idea how Stevenage are doing. And also at this point, Birmingham and Charlton have yet to submit their 2024 reports. So I've just noted down what they were the season before, just as a reference point.
I mean, it's funny that you mentioned Stevenage, isn't it? Because it's almost like, and I'm definitely not saying that this is the case, so please don't sue the Stacey West podcast. But it's almost like a club is trying to almost hide the involvement of the manager of the 23-24 season and the financials. Who managed Stevenage last season, Chris?
Oh, it's our old mate Steve Evans, isn't it?
Oh, that's the one.
That guy.
Yeah. Oh, what a coincidence.
It is a coincidence, isn't it? Or maybe it isn't. Who knows? It probably is. Anyway.
Just asking questions, lads. Just asking questions.
So also, something that's been very prominent in the financial discussions of the last few months, particularly discussing wider League One, is that there has been a 58% rise in wages this season. All these numbers don't include that 58% rise. That will come out in next season's accounts. So bear that in mind when you think of these numbers.
Terrifying.
Yes. So of all of the 24 clubs in League One currently, for their last year's accounts that we have access to, a single football club made a profit of £98,000, Exeter City. Now, there's something quite unique about Exeter City. Of course, they're fan-owned. Also, looking into that, they've got 3.1 million income from sell-on fees from previous transfers, which is good business for them. Good business for them, of course. But I think the fact that only one football club in the whole of League One made a profit is alarming. So it's not just us that's making a loss. Burton, £1.3 million loss. Shrewsbury, 1.6. Rotherham, officially £1.7 million loss, but that includes a £5.2 million loan, not shares. So a loan that will have to be repaid at some point by ASD Lighting PLC. So actually that puts them up to 6.9 million. Northampton 2. Peterborough still lost 2.3 million despite some really big player sales the previous summer. Cambridge United 2.5 million. Wrexham lost £2.7 million, which might be surprising that it's that small. They also announced that they have, quite amazingly, had £26.75 million revenues in League Two, which is more than a lot of Championship clubs, which is commendable. Obviously, that's outstanding. What's baffling is that they got £27 million in, and they still made a loss.
I mean,
it's mad. Absolutely mad.
I suppose that's what happens when you're desperate to get out, or you want to continue the fairy tale, or however they're going to spin it. But that's crazy.
Now, I think it's always worth being fair though, because part of that revenue covered the loans that they had. So I criticised them in that a lot of McElhenney and Reynolds' investment initially was in loans that had to be paid back, and that would come back and bite them at some point. Now they have paid that off now, so fair enough, that's done. I can't criticise that anymore. Now Lincoln, of course, lost 2.9.
I think some of that has also been converted to shares, if I remember rightly, as well.
Yeah. So that fair play, they've gone about that in the right way now. At the time, I was critical of it, but sometimes you have to be credit where it's due. And then we're maybe getting into some of our peers here. So we're looking at Lincoln, of course, 2.9 to 3. Leyton Orient have lost 3.7. Wycombe 3.9 before their investment this summer, an influx of cash. Stockport, 4.7 million loss. Bristol Rovers, 5.3 million. Blackpool, 6.2 million. Mansfield, 6.5. Wigan, 8.2 million. Bolton, also 8.2 million. The season before, Charlton lost 9.5. Barnsley have lost 9.7 million. Huddersfield Town is yet to be released, but has been reported in the news as to be in excess of £20 million losses. Reading 21, and Birmingham's last season was 24.3 before their investment this summer on wages, transfer fees, and dropping into League One, so missing out on revenue streams. So to give us a broader idea of what League One's actually looking like, in terms of the numbers that we have, that's at least pretty much around £150 million lost in League One of teams competing in League One this season for last season, before they increased their wages by 58% on average for this season. It just goes to show how broken football is, firstly, but also from a Lincoln City perspective, just what we're fighting against. Just what we're fighting, because we're trying our best to be as sustainable as possible. It just shows that it's almost impossible to be both sustainable and competitive, because look at the teams that are spending the least. Burton Albion, relegation zone. Shrewsbury, relegation zone. They're the bottom two. Northampton, minus 2 million. They're down the bottom. Cambridge are down there. They're towards the bottom of the table. Bristol Rovers have lost 5.3 million, and they're down towards the bottom end of the table. Like, there is a correlation between not just spending more money, but also losing more, and league position. So just fighting against not just the fact that other teams are spending more than us, but other teams are willing to lose more. It almost feels like they're doing it with no real concern of the consequences, but it can't go on forever. So eye-opening, absolutely eye-opening. And I put a bit of time into that earlier, so I wanted to share it and justify the time I spent. So there you are, I'll be quiet now.
No, absolutely. It's eye-watering. It really, really is. What we're going to do is we're going to take a very, very quick break. You guys can listen to some adverts. We'll say hello to the folks that are watching live on YouTube. We'll have a little discussion about that again when we come back, and just sort of wrap that one up. And then we'll talk about the Huddersfield game on Tuesday. So we will see you in a second. And there we go. Howdy, YouTube. Are we well?
Hello, YouTube.
Let's see who we've got in. Andy is in. Evening, gents and fellow imps. Flossie is in. Malcolm Johnson's in. Harry's in. Steve Jollin's in, saying evening, chaps. John Booth's in. Good evening, all. Andy S is in. Akira.
That's a new name.
That is a new name, but it's also a film. Okay. I thought
we're not going to have this conversation about me not knowing many films again. I've already been slated by Guy for this.
No, it's an old. I think it's an old anime from like the 80s, 90s.
No, I would have no idea about that.
Yeah, I'm not an anime fan, but I do like Akira. It's good. Keith is in. Flossie says, I was lost after the first finger. So many comments we can make on that one.
You and me both.
Steve says, interesting comment about the White Horse. My niece's other half runs it. Top food. I absolutely agree. So there we go. Roy says, hi, guys. Dave Tuplin's in, says hello. Stu says, evening, boys. Don't make it a long one as I've got to edit it tonight. You've only got to take the clips out, Stu. That's how it works. Keith says, not often disagree with you, but House isn't good enough on the ball and gives too many fouls away. I'd also like to see Klukas get a few starts instead of McGrandles.
Yeah, can you go first? I would like to just comment on this, because you said that it's not often you disagree, Keith. I don't think we do disagree.
No, I think
House has a role to play. I think he's definitely gone down in the pecking order, and I agree. His on the ball contribution has definitely dropped off compared to what it was.
Yeah.
If we can get the Ben House on the ball that we had a couple of seasons ago, I think he's a really valuable part of the squad, and I'm not personally not prepared to completely write him off just yet. But I agree, on the ball he has.
He's regressed, doesn't he?
He's definitely feel like he's regressed a little bit this season, yeah. And I'm probably with you on McGrandles as well. I don't dislike Conor McGrandles, but he's not a.
He's a squad player, I think.
Yeah, and he's not a direct replacement for Ethan Arahan.
No.
And with Sam Klukas having a contract to play for potentially for next season because he's got a deal to the end of the season plus an option of one more year. I'd also like to see him get a run in the team just to give him a chance to impress, really. So I'm with you there, really.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with what Keith said there. I think we were probably saying it in a slightly more polished manner. I say polished, I mean rose tinted manner is probably the best way of putting that one. He also says that he agrees with Gary's stupid challenge that they gave the ref a decision to make, and I think that's the point, isn't it? You know, he's with Pordy, he's given the referee a decision to make, and given that he'd been pissed the referee off all afternoon.
Was the decision maybe harsh? I think so, but if he hadn't made a challenge in the first place, then the decision doesn't happen, does it? So that's a good point as well. Or we'll be nice and friendly.
Chris says, evening gents, first time at the bank tomorrow in a while. Not much has changed, mate. You'll be all right. It'll be a good one. And Akira says it's a Japanese anime. It is indeed. Tetsuo, that's the guy that's in it, and he turns into a massive blob. Anyway, yeah, Akira's good. You should watch it.
Okay.
Right, we'll come back in 3, 2, 1. And there we go. Thank you to whoever sponsored us this week. So, let's look back at that because, I mean, we're watching live on YouTube. We've got a couple of reactions here, saying crazy money, and those are absolutely crazy numbers for League One. The bubble will burst. I think it's got to at some point, but it's not going to be immediate because you've got players that have been signed in this inflated wage period of, plus 58%. They're going to be on 3-year contracts. You're going to have adjusted wage structures that will accommodate those players. 2-3-year contracts. It's going to be at least 3-4 years before we start to see it, if not decline to where it quote unquote should be. It's going to be a while before it gets back to normal, isn't it, Chris?
It is. Yeah, it's mad because I expect to see these numbers be significantly higher next season's accounts, which accounts for this season's numbers. As weird as that sounds.
Yeah. It's a year in lieu.
Yeah, basically, and it's just mental. But let's look at this from a Lincoln City perspective. Does it, in the short term, make life really difficult for us? Yeah. Does it, in the long term, actually make life easier for us? Potentially. I think I have to. I think I have to believe it does because I appreciate we're still losing money, but none of that's through loans. I mentioned Rotherham have reported a £1.7 million loss, but only because they've loaned £5 million. That loan has to be repaid. Every investment into our club is in shares. That loss is projected and covered. Now, don't get me wrong. This might feel a little bit like me being, yeah, but, and every one of those teams on that list have probably got a yeah, but answer. But with a Lincoln City hat on, do I feel that we're probably a little bit more prepared because we're being more sensible now for when the financial regulations do come in and when they're looking closer now, aren't they? So yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping so. I'm really hoping so. But I think it's when you see that Lincoln are losing £3 million a year, it's a headline, and it is every year whenever you lose something. But when you compare it relatively to the league, it just goes to show what you're up against because there's two things happening simultaneously. You're up against that financially, and you think, how the hell do you compete with that? But at the same time, you want to have a good football team that's competitive on the pitch, and it's really difficult to get both things to happen at the same time. And yeah, I think sometimes it just offers a little bit of context that whenever we do get a little bit absorbed by what's happening on the pitch, as we all do, because we're football fans and that's what we go to football for. But I think sometimes, particularly when things aren't going too well, it does at least offer a little bit of useful context, and even if it's a little bit humbling at times, I think at least it gives us a little bit of understanding. But again, I think the club, none of this is a surprise to the football club. They've relieved their statement a few months ago. They know the landscape they're working in, and as mentioned, when we a couple of weeks ago when we were discussing the evening we had with Jez, about how ambitious the clubs are about consistently trying to punch above our weight. And yeah, it just shows what we're up against, but everyone's up for the fight. And I'm willing to support a football club that wants to be up for the fight. So that's all good for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something to be said about us trying to do it the right way. And I know it's always said when the accounts get put out, Kieran Maguire will always sit there and he will always put out a post saying, Lincoln are the gold standard when it comes to the transparency, the numbers, and the way that they're doing things at the moment. And they're still losing £3 million a year to try and be competitive. It's we've said it before, we'll say it again. It is unsustainable as an entity at the moment in League One. I don't think it's something's got to be done. I mean, the thing is, what I'm going to find very interesting is if Wrexham and Birmingham do go up next season. There are some more. I think there's a lot more financial constraint and a lot more not regulation as such, but there's a lot more limits on what you can do in the Championship in terms of the money that you spend. If I'm right in thinking, like in League One and League Two, you can essentially, as long as somebody puts the money into your club, you can spend what you want and you can do what you want. I mean, we mentioned it about the transfer fees. If somebody wants to loan Lincoln City £10 million, we can go out and we can spend £10 million on a striker. But that's not going to happen. Whereas in the Championship, that money has to be generated by the club, I believe. I know that there is a big difference, and it actually works out. If you're a club with a lot of money to spend, it actually works out to be more difficult to spend that money in the Championship than it is in League One.
Yeah, at least there are some rules. In the Championship, I think you can lose, I believe it's 39 million over a 3-year rolling period. It's just mad. It's still baffling in my mind that you can. It's not that you can spend 39. You can lose 39 million pounds, and that's all right. You're fine. It's absolutely. I can't get my head around that. But that's just how football is at the moment. But we're here to talk about what happens on the pitch rather than off it. I know they are inherently linked together. If I had to talk about this anymore, then I think I'm going to start shouting and crying. So let's move on to Tuesday, which of course is going to be, I suppose, a little bit overshadowed maybe by some off-field news for our opponents, though, in Huddersfield Town. This is really interesting, kind of what's going on at Huddersfield, which is definitely overshadowing what's happening on the pitch at the moment. So reported £20 million losses. That's a lot of money, obviously. And then talks of wanting to increase season ticket prices by almost 100%, getting rid of concessions. And it's just awful that this is happening. But, at the end of the day, the harsh reality of paying overinflated wages, spending a lot of money in transfer fees, that losing £20+ million a year, at some point you've got to try and get the money back from somewhere. And what's happening is the ownership appears to be asking the fans to put their hands in their pockets to cover up from their mismanagement.
Yeah, so I if you haven't seen it yet, I've put the preview up on YouTube. I spoke to Cozzy from And He Takes That Chance. We spoke to him earlier on the season, really good guy. And I think earlier in the season, he was quite positive about how it was going to go. In spite of, it's one of those, in spite of themselves, I think they were hopeful that they'd make a return to the Championship. But it honestly, it just seems like a club in shambles at the moment. Like, as you mentioned, the season ticket debacle has rolled on. I think they've had £250 season tickets for a while, which is good. Let's be honest. That's a really good deal for a club the size of Huddersfield to be saying, "Yep, cool, 25 quid, 250 quid, season ticket, job done." And then apparently there were lots of discussions around the fan groups, so the equivalent of the supporters board or fan advisory board, and lots of different fan groups all having their input. And then at one point they just went, "Yep, okay, cool. It looks like we will gradually increase the price to get back up to what we would call a quote normal season ticket price for League One." And then it appears that the board just went back on it and went, "Sod it, let's do it all in one go." So they went from £250 to £440. And like you say, they've also cut the student prices. They've also cut the concession prices. So no matter what you were paying for your season ticket last season, the projected cost was going to be £440 for this year. It's ridiculous. And a lot of their fans are rightfully fuming. In addition to that, you also have just a general sense of unrest with how things are. They've obviously just recently sacked Michael Duff. And then this past weekend, they were without Freddie Ladapo and Dion Charles. Now, Dion Charles was spotted in the away end at Blackpool supporting Bolton. Loads of selfies with Bolton fans. how can that be allowed to for starters? I don't get how that's a thing. And Freddie Ladapo apparently didn't show up for the game at the weekend because it was his wedding. So, yeah, a club that seems to be in a bit of disarray at the minute, and it's kind of gone through to things on the pitch. Got beat by Crawley. No, they didn't. That was Rotherham. Sorry,
they beat Crawley. Yeah, they beat Crawley.
Oh, yeah, they beat Crawley. I was thinking of Rotherham because the other bit of news: Steve Evans got sacked. It's just been in my mind. It's made me happy. Sorry, it's not happy. That's not nice. They got hammered by Charlton at the weekend. That's who I was thinking of. Yes, other team beginning with C. Yeah, got absolutely hammered by Charlton. They beat Crawley, and Cozzy was saying that was a game where Crawley just looked absolutely abysmal in every sense of the word. So it kind of seemed like a false dawn for John Worthington, who is the interim manager. I don't think there's any murmurings about a permanent replacement for Michael Duff. They've gone from Duff's back five. They've played a back four for the past couple of games. It just seems really like the ideal time to play Huddersfield Town, doesn't it, on Tuesday night?
Yeah, it does really. And that's not us really taking anything for granted, but if you had to pick a time at any point this season where you'd like to play them, it is literally right now. The game is going to be overshadowed from a Huddersfield perspective by this stuff that's happening off the pitch.
Yep.
But on it, they have still got a real opportunity to get into the playoffs because they are currently just 1 place out and 1 point out of the playoff race. Reading occupy 6th position, which is mad, by the way. There's been a really good run, Reading, recently. But they're just a point behind Reading, and they've got a superior goal difference. What's absolutely baffling is, I've got nothing wrong with ex-players going back and supporting their old clubs, going in with the fans they had an affinity with.
You don't do it when you're on loan at another club.
Yeah, and it's the fact that directly below them in the league is Bolton. Yeah. Like, that's bizarre. Like, we'd welcome Harry Toffolo to come back here and have and look at, Joe Taylor came back earlier in the season, didn't need to watch a game. No issue with that at all. Quite like it in a way. They're human at the end of the day. Have relationships with those clubs. The difference there,
though, is when Joe Taylor came back, he hadn't signed for Huddersfield at the time.
Oh no,
and also,
this is the point I'm making.
Also, he sat in the stand with the directors. He didn't get in and amongst it with all of the fans. And the same with Toff. When he comes back, he kind of sits in the library. So it's like, I just can't. The thing that Cozzy said to me was that it felt like Duff had a handle on a lot of things. Like it was kind of, you've got the discipline there, and he had a handle on a lot of things where the players, if they wanted to go and tit about and do stuff, Duff was like, all right, just wind it in. Let's calm it down and let's keep it professional. And it seems like he's gone, and it's just a playground at the minute. Obviously, Worthington was I think he was the under-21s coach before coming in, and like I say, he's the interim manager. He's changed the system. I have never known a club that is on the verge of being in the playoffs feel this miserable.
Yeah, good point. Maybe Barnsley last season and a terrible run going into the playoffs, sacked their gaffer, didn't they, and just crept in. But it's kind of, from the outside looking in, it feels like it's come out of nowhere because Huddersfield had a slow start to the season, but we all expected them to pick up a little bit of steam once they their new signings settled, and they did. They, from October to January, went on a 16-game unbeaten run. 10 of those were wins. Things were looking up. I honestly thought they were going to end up coming second. I thought it would be them and Birmingham top two at that point. And then in an 11-match streak following the 16 games unbeaten, they won 3, drew 1, lost 7, which ultimately culminated in Mike Duff losing his job. And in the last 2 matches since John Worthington's come in, who is a bit of it's almost like a Nonny-Gunnar Solskjaer taking over at Man United. It's very much try and get the fans on side with a club legend coming back. It's all about the vibes. This isn't me criticising Worthington as a manager, but the fact that he is a Huddersfield legend clearly will have been part of the reasoning for him taking the role, or at least been appointed. And it looked great, beating a bit of new lease of life. bit of positivity around the ground. 5-1 win at home against Crawley, but Huddersfield stylistically are quite similar to us in some ways. They're certainly quite aggressive, certainly quite difficult to beat, good at set pieces. Basically, all the stuff that Crawley are crap at, and we battered Crawley ourselves by being good at what we're good at, and Crawley being bad at what they are bad at, and it just aligns perfectly stylistically. Very, very similar when you play against Crawley and your Huddersfield Town. But of course, at that point, you think brilliant. As a Huddersfield fan, you think brilliant. At least on the pitch is looking up. We're still within easy reaching distance of the playoffs. We're all good. And then they turn up at Charlton and lose 4-0 on Saturday with some quite catastrophic defending, by the way, that causes the goals. There was some good finishes, by the way, some really incisive finishes from Charlton Athletic, but the opportunities
thing is, when you see
from mistakes a lot of the
when
time.
when you see Charlton's opening goal, 30 seconds in and you're defending like that, it's not ideal, is it?
Yeah, it seems a bit idealistic to change things to the extent that Worthington seems to stylistically at the moment, and they certainly seemed quite susceptible when they were playing out from the back. I appreciate there's only really one game that you can go off the back of this to see, because the Crawley game was so one-sided. And one game is quite a small sample size to really build a clear picture. But it looks like they're maybe weaker at that than they were earlier in the season, and part of that is that they've shifted from a back three to a back four. Whether they'll keep that or not for Tuesday, we'll see. But that does mean that you've got one fewer player at the back to play out with. So it is more difficult to play out. But once you break the lines, you've got more players forward. So that's why we've changed, is we want to get the ball, have more players at the pitch when we do attack. So that's why we've changed. So it looks like it'll probably be 4-2-3-1 versus 4-2-3-1 on Tuesday night. That would be my expectation. But it's just like you say, a good time to play them. So I'm going to go through a couple of bits and bobs stat wise, nothing too much, because these are stats over the whole season, and right now they're a very different team than they were 3-4 months ago. But one of our big strengths, of course, is set pieces. Probably not going to be as big a threat today, not today, so tomorrow, as it was, or it has been throughout the season, because Huddersfield are the best team in League One at defending set pieces. Only conceded 3 goals all season from set pieces. That's really impressive. We're one of the best teams, and we've still conceded 10. So to have only conceded 3 is outstanding, really. And they've also scored the third highest amount of their goals, of set piece goals. Obviously, we've scored the most. Is it immovable force versus the unstoppable force versus the immovable objects? Which of those will win? Maybe that's what we're going to see here. But if that's the case, then you're probably that's probably not going to result in a goal, is it? I'm thinking our normal threat from set pieces might be a little bit nullified here. I'm thinking a high press and an aggressive play, a quick start to maybe punish a team low on confidence could be our way forward here. We have been a bit more threatening in the last few games from open play, albeit not against Wycombe, against a team that's very, very solid defensively. Difficult one to predict this, because if a good version of Huddersfield turn up, it should be a really tough game for us. But because of the situation they find themselves in, and that disarray off the pitch does often manifest itself on the pitch. We've seen that time and time again with many, many football clubs, which is, on a side note, one reason why Reading continue to baffle me, because of the unrest behind the scenes. For years, they perform quite well on the pitch, despite that. But most teams where there's unrest off the pitch, you see that manifest itself on it. And we've certainly seen it recently at Huddersfield as well. So, what do I predict? Do I have to predict anything? I suppose I do, don't I, really?
Well, I think one thing that I wanted to bring up, obviously, there are going to be 2 familiar faces.
Of course. How could we not talk about this?
The first one kind of slots back into that discussion around John Worthington and his change of style. Obviously, Lasse Sorensen was playing as a right wing back for us, going into a team that is going to be wanting to play 3-5-2. And it was a weird one, because, again, going back to the preview, Cosy was saying in that he started well. And obviously, every other game he was getting an assist or a goal or whatever it was. It seemed that his name was coming up more often than not. And then he kind of fell out of favour. And the thing that really shocked me in the discussion that we had, he said, I wonder if there's an attitude thing with Lasse. And that was exactly my reaction. I kind of went, Like, dog being shown a card trick. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, I wonder if there might be a bit of a cultural disconnect with Lass at Huddersfield. But the fact is, if it's going to be a back four, I don't think we see him play tomorrow.
Yeah. Or not play.
He's not a right back, is he?
Yeah, he's not going to play to his full ability if he's playing right back in a four. And if he does, and he's playing how he played as a wing back. He in the industry it's known as cheating. It's not actually cheating, but it's getting ahead of the ball early before it comes to you, or not tracking back. Now, obviously, Lass always tracked back, but when we had the ball in deep areas, Lass was on his bike. He had gone, and Alex Mitchell's positioning and athleticism allowed him to do that. And Lass's threat going forward was absolutely valuable for us, so it worked. But in a pack four, we can't do that. Or if you do, there's a massive old gap left behind you, which we can easily exploit, particularly if we play wingers. So
absolutely,
yeah, we're not going to see the best version of Lass Sorensen if they do play a back four. But I really like Lass as a guy. But obviously, as a Lincoln City supporter, I don't want him to play well tomorrow because I want us to win.
Yes. I mean, the other one, obviously, Joe Taylor. They signed him in January for £3 million. A lot of fanfare around that. Played, I think, 4 games on the bounce, or maybe not even that, 3 games on the bounce, got injured. He is now back in the squad, so he is playing again now. He played on Saturday, and I believe he played in that win against Crawley. So, I mean, that's 1 goal already. We can chalk that one up. That's standard. We've debunked it. We've talked about it. It will happen, I'm pretty sure. So I'm going to say that given that it seems to be an ideal time to play them, normally I would say that, I think we can probably walk away 3-1 winners tomorrow night. However, there is the X factor that we haven't talked about here. As Reginald Wilson says in the chat, please look at our record against Huddersfield and the oddball things that have happened. So, I know Gary mentioned this on the dog walk, and it seems to be one of those where it's a rivalry where maybe it's one-sided, a bit like England and Germany. Everybody in England thinks, the Germans are obsessed with it. They don't care. Like, German fans do not care about the England national team at all. I'm pretty sure that this is going to be the same way. Lincoln fans probably dislike Huddersfield. They don't care. But you look at things that have happened around Huddersfield and Lincoln City over the past 20 years or so.
So many things.
Andy Booth's dive, Pavel Abbott's goal, Danny and Nicky, Harry Toffolo, Lass, and then to a lesser extent Joe Taylor, because I don't really think we were in with a chance of signing him.
Mm-hmm.
But and then of course there's the Emley game, which is tangentially related to Huddersfield because we played in that stadium when we got knocked out of the FA Cup. It's a weird one. I mean, that Pavel Abbott goal still stings, by the way. Absolutely horrendous. And I did have an apology, a face-to-face apology. I think I've actually spoken about this on the podcast before. If I have, forgive me. But if I can get slightly personal for a second, when my dad was on his on his last legs, I went to the club and I tried to arrange a signed card from all the players. The club were really accommodating. They did that. And when I went to pick it up, they said, "Oh, sorry, but Peter," because Jacko was the manager at the time, said Peter couldn't sign it. Is there any, do you want him to come and see your dad? I was like, what? So sure enough, that night I got a phone call. I was in the hospital, got a phone call. It was like, "Oh, it's Peter. I'm in reception." I was like, "Okay." So I went out to meet him, and as we came back, he said, what's happening and everything else. And he said, "Yeah, as long as he doesn't ask me about that bloody Pavel Abbott goal." I was like, "Okay, I'm pretty sure we're over that now." But yeah, sure enough, he was like, "Yeah, he was offside. He was offside by a mile." So yeah, that was that. But yeah, that Huddersfield are always one of those teams where, like I say, I think we care about it a lot more than they do, and it always there just seems to be something, doesn't there, where it's weird, and this has happened.
Yeah, There's always another talking point with Huddersfield. It's weird. I feel like I really want us to win this more than we need to because of the story of the season. It feels like a far more important game than it really is because I just want to get one over on them. Because let's be honest, we've hardly beaten them. We're always the butt of the jokes when there's things going on. It's always them doing something against us. So it'd be nice just to, I know no one enjoys things happening off the pitch like they're happening at Huddersfield, and we're all kind of football fans in the football family, and that's definitely true. But just for one more Tuesday night, let's just add to their misery. Just then they can all be happy and better at on Saturday. But tomorrow night, can we just twist the knife just a little bit and give ourselves just a little bit of release and relief from 20 plus years of frustration and anguish? Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, it would. And you know what would make it even sweeter? If we won 2-0, if we won by 2 clear goals tomorrow night, one of them was from a really, really obviously dodgy penalty, and the other one was a goal that was about a yard offside when the ball was played.
Yes, let's do that, please.
Just icing on the cake, and that would be perfect. So, yeah. But look, I think we're just about wrapped up with Huddersfield. I'm going to say 3-1 Lincoln. I'm feeling like we can do something tomorrow. I think it's going to be a good opportunity to put on a show, as they say.
2-1 win.
2-1 win. Okay. Well, I think we're both going for 3 points. Hopefully,
I feel like
we'll all be good. So
I'm going to be honest with you, Ben. I wanted to say 2-2 then, but I didn't go along with my rhetoric of the last 5 minutes, so I had to pick a 2-1 win.
Well, you've got to wear something. Right. That is a good spot to wrap up the preview. Only thing I think left to plug or talk about is, as always, go and get involved in the raffle. I think Gaz is getting down to the ground early. He will be at the Red Imps Trust stand tomorrow. Chris has got the football.
Ball. That's one of many prizes.
Chris has got the football. I've got the Central Bank. So yeah, these are. I've made 3 of these. One of them failed spectacularly, and I've since repaired it. That is staying with me. The other one is currently sat on my desk, and the other one is going into the raffle. So yeah, get involved. Get yourself some tickets. Hopefully you can win some cool stuff. Check the website for all of the details. And if you don't fancy getting involved with the raffle but fancy giving some money away, that just seems a bit weird. Go and sponsor Gaz. Yeah. Anything you want to talk about, Chris?
Nope. All good.
Okay. Good stuff. Right. Well, that has been episode number 370 of the Stacey West podcast. We've talked about Huddersfield. We've talked about Wycombe. We've talked about some financial stuff, and we've plugged the raffle. So that has been your episode. I have been Ben. He has been Chris, and we'll see you at the bank. Up the Imps.
Up the Imps.